You're listening to the Everything Jewish 10 Minutes at a Time podcast, where you'll learn about every Jewish topic imaginable in about 10 minutes. And before we dive in, let me make my usual apology. My voice isn't a real voice. It's an AI-generated one. So my Hebrew pronunciations may sound like I'm trying to order at a deli while reading off a smudged menu. If I say something funny, just laugh with me, not at me. Today's topic is Book of Proverbs. This is one of those parts of the Bible that doesn't take you on a long journey with plagues, kings, or wandering in the desert. Instead, it's like your wise old uncle who always has a clever line at the dinner table. Proverbs, or Mishlei in Hebrew, is packed with sayings and short teachings about how to live a smart, moral, and decent life. You could say it's the original life hacks guide written centuries before BuzzFeed existed. Now, let's set the scene. Proverbs is part of the third section of the Hebrew Bible, known as the Writings, or Ketuvim. It's traditionally attributed to King Solomon, who was famous for his wisdom, wealth, and questionable taste in palace decorating. Solomon is often imagined as the Jewish world's Yoda, except instead of teaching Luke Skywalker with riddles, he was teaching an entire nation how not to be foolish. But Proverbs isn't just Solomon's greatest hits album. The book is a compilation, bringing together wisdom from multiple sources and editors over centuries. That means you'll find different styles and perspectives sprinkled throughout. Some are short, punchy one-liners, while others stretch into longer poetic lessons. The core idea, though, stays consistent. Wisdom isn't just about knowing stuff. It's about living well, being just, and fearing God in the sense of respecting the divine order. The style of Proverbs makes it stand out. If you're imagining long stories like in Genesis or Exodus, you'll be surprised. This book is much more like scrolling through Twitter, short bursts of wisdom, sometimes witty, sometimes biting, always memorable. One proverb might warn against being lazy, describing the sluggard who can't even lift food to his mouth. Another praises the virtues of honesty, hard work, or kindness. Think of it as the biblical version of motivational posters, except sharper and less cheesy. And the rhythm of Hebrew poetry adds punch, often repeating or contrasting ideas for emphasis. For example, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. You can almost imagine it as a meme. On one side, a calm person sipping tea. On the other, someone yelling in all caps on Facebook. Same energy. These sayings are designed to stick in your brain, and they still do. One of the recurring themes in Proverbs is wisdom itself. The book practically gives wisdom a personality, almost like she's a character in her own right. In fact, wisdom is often portrayed as a woman calling out in the streets, offering guidance to anyone who will listen. This is not just poetic flair. It's a way of saying wisdom is woven into daily life, available if you pay attention. And wisdom here isn't limited to being book smart or acing a test. It's practical, moral, and spiritual. It's about how you treat people, how you speak, how you work, and how you approach God. Contrast that with foolishness, which Proverbs also loves to describe in vivid, often comical ways. The fool is lazy, loud, careless with words, and often ends up in embarrassing trouble. If Proverbs had emojis, wisdom would be a light bulb, and folly would be a facepalm. It's timeless stuff, really. Another famous section is the description of the woman of valor, or Eshet Shayil, at the very end of Proverbs. This passage is recited in many Jewish homes on Friday nights to honor women in the household. It describes an ideal woman who is hardworking, wise, kind, and deeply respected. She's basically the MVP of her family and community, balancing everything from running a household to running a business. Some modern readers see it as a poetic tribute, while others read it with a raised eyebrow, wondering if anyone could really live up to such a superhero resume. Either way, the passage has become one of the most quoted parts of Proverbs, turning into both a song of praise and a cultural touchstone. It shows how Proverbs isn't just abstract wisdom floating around. It's wisdom applied to daily life, relationships, and values, with staying power across centuries. Let's not forget the humor in Proverbs. Yes, humor. The biblical writers may not have been doing stand-up at open mic night, but they definitely had a sharp sense of wit. Consider the proverb about a person who meddles in a fight that's not theirs. It says they're like someone grabbing a stray dog by the ears. In other words, don't do it unless you want to get bitten. That's the kind of imagery that makes the advice unforgettable. Or the one about a lazy person who says, "There's a lion in the street," as an excuse for not leaving the house. It's basically the ancient version of saying, "I can't come to work, my Wi-Fi is down." These funny, vivid comparisons make the wisdom relatable and memorable, which is probably why so many people still quote Proverbs today. It's like ancient comedy mixed with life coaching. So how has Proverbs been used in Jewish life? Beyond personal study, many of its sayings became part of the cultural language of Judaism. Rabbis quoted them in sermons, parents taught them to children, and they seeped into liturgy and daily conversation. Because Proverbs is all about living wisely and ethically, it bridges the gap between lofty theology and the nitty-gritty of everyday life. It's not telling you how to build a temple, or wage a war. It's telling you how to be a decent human being in your family, workplace, and community. And that practicality makes it universal. You don't need a PhD in Talmud to understand. Pride goes before a fall. You just need to have slipped on a banana peel, either literally or figuratively. That accessibility helped Proverbs cross boundaries, influencing not just Jewish thought, but also Christian and general Western culture. If you step back, Proverbs is part of a larger genre known as wisdom literature. This includes books like Job and Ecclesiastes, which ask bigger, often harder questions about suffering and meaning. Compared to those, Proverbs feels more straightforward, like the cheerful friend who always finds a silver lining. But that doesn't mean it's shallow. In fact, Proverbs sets the stage for those deeper explorations by grounding wisdom in everyday choices. It suggests that a good life is built one action, one word, one decision at a time. And by connecting wisdom with reverence for God, it ties the ethical and the spiritual together. In Jewish tradition, this idea is huge. The path to holiness isn't just through rituals, but through the daily grind of how you treat others. That's what makes Proverbs both approachable and profound. Here's a modern way to think about it. Proverbs is like a mashup of TikTok life hacks, TED Talks, and your grandma's advice. It's practical, sometimes snappy, and always trying to make you just a little bit wiser than you were 5 minutes ago. And like anything timeless, you can see its fingerprints all over popular culture. Ever heard the phrase, "spare the rod, spoil the child"? That comes straight from Proverbs. Or how about, "iron sharpens iron"? Yep, that's in there too. These sayings got so embedded in English and other languages that people often don't even realize they're quoting the Bible. That shows the staying power of a good proverb. When words are short, sharp, and true, they have a way of sticking around, longer than memes, longer than tweets, maybe even longer than Marvel movies. So, let's wrap it up. The Book of Proverbs may not have the dramatic flair of the Exodus or the epic battles of the prophets, but it's one of the most practical, down-to-earth parts of the Hebrew Bible. It's wisdom distilled into little bites meant to guide how you live, work, speak, and relate to others. From poking fun at lazy people to lifting up the woman of valor, from shaping Jewish culture to sneaking into English idioms, Proverbs has left an enormous impact. It's proof that sometimes the smallest, simplest phrases can carry the deepest truths. If you ever feel overwhelmed by the complexity of life, crack open Proverbs and you'll find something that feels fresh, even after a couple thousand years. Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, send it to a friend who might like it too, or leave a positive review so others can discover the podcast. See you next time on Everything Jewish, 10 minutes at a time.